Anyone hear me?
Kate, good evening.
Oh, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, very well.
How is the weather?
Well, luckily the storm front that was very big is bypassed us, which is
Oh,
unfortunate. I wanted the rain for my vegetables, but that's okay. So
oh,
we're all good. We're all clear. But it's
ex-
good to test.
excellent. Okay, so while we're gonna start in about 20 minutes, so would you like to share your screen and see whether it works?
Would you share my screen with me? I've you've got the stuff. You want me to share my screen?
Whatever is better for you. If you want, I
It's
can share.
better. Yeah, if you do it, it's better.
Okay, that's no problem. So, your presentation, Kate Hughes, yes.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
It's me.
Okay. Okay, so this is your presentation, Kate. So
Yeah.
we'll share it in full mode, and whenever you want to say next slide, just let me know and I will press it on the next slide.
So I'll just say next slide.
Yeah, and then I'll just continue doing this
Okay.
like that. Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tuan Tran, good morning. Can you hear us?
Good morning, Sir Robs.
Good morning, Juan. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So, we're gonna start in about 18 minutes. So just as a trial, would you like to share your screen to see whether it works, your presentation?
Okay, we do it. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Okay, that's perfect. So whenever your turn will be, just you're gonna share your screen, put in the presentation mode, and then we can start it. Yeah, the presentation mode, you know the button for the presentation mode? It's at the bottom of right-hand side. No, next one.
This one?
No, the other one. Next one. Yeah, the last one, slideshow, exactly. So you have to press this one. Yeah, and now we can see it in full screen. And then you just click on the app. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna do like,
Okay, thank you.
okay, you can stop sharing your screen. You have to come back to, yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna grab some tea for me, and I'll see you in 15 minutes.
Hello, Kate. Do you hear me?
Hello. Hello.
So it's good
Yes,
to
I
test the microphone.
can. Hello, what's your name? Marie, is it?
Yeah,
Maria.
Maria. So yeah, um,
What
I'm
country are you in?
I'm from Austria, and I work for the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is as a joint center part of the FAO. And
Yeah,
I'm
and has done huge amount of work for many years. That agency has done a lot of work. Yeah.
and you?
Oh, well, I'm nearly finished retired, but you never retire. So So I'm not employed by anybody. So I've always caught, and what we say, we catch and kill our own. So I've always got my own small contracts or big contract. So I'm an independent thinker and independent in everything I do, but I'm very much interested always in soil health. So yeah, so I'm on the more an outlier, not associated. But I know what the FAO does, and from years ago, the Green Revolution studies in Indonesia that I did, and things like that. So I have now at my age, I have a quite some understanding, a range of things. But it's really beautiful to do this short talk today because it reminded me of all the agricultural extension programs that go on and all this amazing stuff at field work level and local government level, provincial level. And then there's all of us educated elites. So I see Romania has a new possibility of a Romania. I just heard it on the radio Deutsche Welle has a possibility of a more very conservative politician coming in. I thought,
Yeah,
well, the
yeah.
way through this is to share information about things that everyone agrees with, which is improving, keeping productivity in agriculture, employment. So we don't worry about these things in Australia. It's so far away. But we actually do. A lot of us take a lot of interest in international politics.
Time-wise, I'm better off, right? We
Sorry?
have time-wise, I'm better off being in Austria, which has similar, the same time zone as Rome has. So
Oh,
for
that's all
me, it's
right.
lunchtime, but I think it's
It's 10 p.m., so that's okay. I was watching the cricket, listening to the radio. Then I had a nice cup of peppermint tea, and now I'm fresh. But it's been very hot today, like 38 degrees.
okay. Yeah, we're in winter.
It's still spring. We haven't even entered the hot period yet. So anyway, we know what's coming.
Good, nice meeting you. So I'm glad that I managed to set the proper headphone. Is it too loud?
No, it's
Is this good?
perfectly fine. Yes.
Okay.
And is mine too loud? Is that
No,
okay?
it's also good. I can adjust what I hear, but yeah, everything fine. Yeah. Good. So then I mute myself again.
Okay, we're gonna start, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and evening. We're gonna start very shortly in about 3 minutes.
Oh, Serge, are you there, Serge?
I am, yes.
Very good. How many people are registered to attend, please?
Well, roughly registration, we have just over 800, but
Yeah.
because of the time difference, we have many participants from South America and Australia, New Zealand as well. That said, because of time difference, they're unable to join us. So as North America, so already received about 100 emails over the last few days saying that asking for recordings and presentations to be recorded.
Yeah.
So yesterday we had about 160, so we're expecting to have about more than 100 today.
No, that's good. We can all benefit having the technology for the recording and everything.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You can't fit everybody in the whole world.
No, of course not.
No.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone. We're going to start shortly. Still waiting for people to join.
Serge, are you muted?
See, you're muted, Saj.
Ravi, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Oh, was I muted all the time?
We hear you now.
Okay. Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we're starting. So I just would like to welcome everyone to the second day of the International Network on Soil Pollution. My name is Sergius Ustinov, and I'm the coordinator of this network. I'll be your moderator for the next 2 hours. We had a very fruitful discussion yesterday about the ongoing activities of the network. However, today we're gonna divert a little bit from the INSOP activities because we managed to bring on board 5 wonderful guest speakers who will talk about various topics of soil pollution. So we have nothing to do with INSOP or FAO, but we have very diverse topics to discuss and address. We're gonna have 5 guest speakers. Each guest speaker will have 15 minutes presentation, followed by 10 minutes questions and answers. In case you have any questions, you're free to raise your hand and I will unmute you, and then you will be able to speak, and we can have a discussion. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to use the chat function to ask your question in the chat box. Today's speakers, we have Kate Hughes joining us from Australia Ecology Data Bank, who will talk about how to effectively communicate soil pollution to the public, followed by a second guest speaker joining us from the European Commission, your Joint Research Center, Arthur Fendrick, who will present the recent maps that were produced by the GRC on arsenic in the European topsoils and the technologies behind. The third speaker will be my colleague Maria Haling, who is joining us from Joint FAO IAEA, or International Atomic Energy Agency Center of Nuclear Techniques in Food and Agriculture, to talk more about emerging contaminants. And today we're going to talk about microplastic and why we should take care of it and start addressing. The fourth speaker will be joining us from the US, Kansas State University, Hu Tuan Tran, who will talk about military impacted areas and dioxin pollution in Vietnam. And the last speaker will join us from Peru, South America, Pedro Cifuentes Ames, who will continue discussion on mining activities and their risks to soil and perhaps water pollution. Depends on the time, how much we have. Without further ado, I see that most of the speakers of today's session join us. We have the chair, we have vice chair, we have almost the whole INSOP steering committee here on board, and we have our members. We're already 89 members and 90 participants joining us, and I expect to have this figure even bigger, up to 100 and even more. Well, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Kate Hughes, who is joining us now from Australia. And a quick word about Kate. She's the director at Ecology Data Bank Service. She's a specialist in communication between industry and the public. She has over 35 years of experience as an environmental advocate, and she's a researcher with an interest in public health protection and the remediation of contaminated environments. She holds 2 PhDs, one on politics and technology transfer from University of Adelaide, Australia, and the second PhD on sustainable futures and risk communication from University of Technology, Sydney. Kate, we have already 92 participants join us, and we're eager to hear your presentation and talk about effective risk communication. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Lovely to speak to you from Australia. Very hot here today and snow where you are. Next slide, please, Sergey. Thank you. When I was preparing this, I thought, what are the overall aims of INSOP? And you have this very grand and heroic idea to work towards zero pollution. It's really good to have big aims. And the activities around it I worked out from the brochure. You're improving knowledge, so you're looking at a whole lot of research, different research areas, including the ones that we're going to hear from today, including arsenic in the soil, etc., microplastics, and then effects on health and environment from soil pollution. But the ones that I think are the most germane to my discussion today about effective risk communication is strengthening technical capacities and legal frameworks and promoting exchange of experiences and technologies. So next slide, please, Sergey. And these are the 2 that are really framing it. Now, before we think about what we're going to communicate, you really need to think through who you need to communicate with. Now, I'm thinking now that when we say we're communicating with the public, well, who are they? There's so many different groups and layers. So in order to be very effective, and when you are trying to communicate something about your work, explaining the risks and the benefits of, your technologies or the processes that you bring, you really need first cab off the rank, we say in Australia. First thing is identify your stakeholders, and then Why do you need to communicate with these people? You think you know immediately, oh, we want to tell them about this, we want to inform them about this policy. Really, really need to think clearly and quietly about why. And those 2 points to strengthen the technical capacities and legal frameworks and promote exchange of experiences and technologies, that's why you need to communicate with them to promote the INSOP aims. And what sort of communication works best? Well, obviously good language and spoken language, well-designed imagery, which is my favorite topic because it's always so mainly so badly done, explaining the meaning of key technical terms, not as easy as you think, and context friendly. Next slide, please. Now, I just thought I'd drop in this little slide for our first topic, identifying stakeholders. This is the group of stakeholders that worked for, well, off and on for nearly a decade on the remediation of the Union Carbide pesticide plant in Sydney, Australia, where they actually made the 2,4,5-T that ended up in Vietnam to create that dioxin problem that one of the guest speakers is going to speak about in a little bit later. But you've got local government people, members in the community who might not be familiar with the language, experts, and of course the public health represented by the kids in the middle. It might be another expert in another field that's adjacent to your domain of expertise, but it's different. You might need to consider that person a stakeholder. And of course, the commercial side, which might be the developers or the people who are doing new farm techniques or whatever on the land that would be remediated. In this case, it was great big new developments. And we always must think about those who cannot speak for themselves because they're quals or co-authors. And then we have our international and national NGOs, non-government organisations. So this is the sort of stakeholder group we would assemble for a major project on remediation of contaminated soils in Australia. Sometimes it works quite well. Next slide, please. But what about the INSOP stakeholders? Who are they? So I thought this is probably a good start. They're policymakers and their role, why you want to communicate with them. They have a role in pesticide bans or restrictions that you might want. For example, you might finally want to get rid of monocrotophos, which I can't believe is still used, you know, an old-fashioned organophosphate, gosh, still used widely. And then, of course, you've got all those counterfeit fake pesticides being used in many countries too. So bans on them, and then non-essential uses of plastic, etc. So policymakers are stakeholders, but there's so many of them. And then organisations, including technology companies and research organisations who are associated with soil contamination and cleanup. Never forget to go to those who are not only doing the research on the problem, but those who are solving the problem. Public agencies, of course, are absolutely critical, probably the core thing with agricultural extension programs, all those things that have been running forever in many countries throughout the world. Always a stakeholder. Farmer organisations, of course, and always champion the local knowledge that works and back former knowledge as well. And I think a key, if the focus would be on, for example, on pesticides, just for example, commercial suppliers of farm inputs, you know, the hazard operability studies, the drum protocols, the legal requirements, etc., and not selling any of those counterfeit pesticides. And of course, NGOs can be stakeholders too. There's a lot of great extension work that I'm sure a lot of you would be very familiar with. Next slide, please. So after looking at the stakeholders, I just thought I'd drop this little one in, that stakeholders, for example, farm suppliers and farmers, in this case graziers, can be real partners in soil sustainability because they're actually at what we say at the coalface. They're in the field. So in Australia, there's been a program called Drumbuster because there was some terrible situations with abandoned drums just tucked on landfills or dumped in the sides near rivers. And this was all addressed or maybe one generation ago, and it's been an ongoing program. And why I've got that little yellow arrow there is because in Australia, being a multicultural society, whenever you get government or institutional communications in flyers or brochures, so often they're translated into the languages of the people whom you need to reach. Next slide, please. So that's Australian Drum Muster. They're good partners. And another partners, of course, and a lot of you would know this, is your research colleagues. This is Professor Melanie Carr's work on pesticide residues. I picked this up at the Eco Forum conference down in New Zealand the other week, and work on a partnership with an Auckland council, Waikato, the regional council, the university, a true partnership addressing this issue of multiple pesticide residues in soils. Next slide, please. So that's exchange of experience. And again, here also picked up from Eco Forum. Land soil pollution, of course, as you would know, is often results from uncontrolled landfills. It's a nightmare, we all know. Well-managed landfills are seen to be expensive. But here was a lovely piece of work done by a postgraduate, improvement of bentonite performance by using natural polymers to minimise leachate leakage from landfills. And of course, there's a nice little graphic there down the bottom, on the other side, just to show how it's working. So landfills, I think, are a very important focus for any future work on working towards zero pollution. Next slide, please. So we're again sharing information, and again making sure you don't leave out those who invest and create technologies to create solutions. I'm a bit proud of this one because it's made in my hometown. Rembine is a sorbent for soils and surface and groundwater. It's got a good profile now. It's proven at full scale, and it's compared to other forms of dealing, for example, this is for PFAS, it's relatively inexpensive. So there's a solution that might come up. Next slide, please. So they're the sort of partners you can have. So on our topic 3, which is what sort of communication works best, well, there's always some people who are good at communicating and those are more shy. Those that have a good timbre in their voice and know how to present. It doesn't mean if you're not top of the pops like that you cannot improve. And risk communication is really, really not science communication. I haven't put that in the slide because we've just got the 15 minutes, but it is not science communication. Actually, can we go back a bit, Serge? I think we missed a definition. Yes. Yeah, go forward. Next slide. And next slide. Thank you. Next one. Next one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, not going back, going forward. Yeah. Keep going. Next one. Next one. We're going towards the end. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can we just go back one? There was a definition of risk communication. Oh, we missed it.
No, I think we missed this slide.
All right, that's okay. So there we go. That was it.
Yeah.
Actually go back. Sorry, it's 10 o'clock at night. Could you go back one? I beg your pardon. What sort of risk communication works best? These are the topics I picked up. What sort of risks are we trying to explain? So once again, thinking, oh, I've got to go and talk to these people, or I'm trying to get across this idea on policy, or we're going to talk to somebody about, you know, bans and restrictions or something like that, or improving, or reducing leachate from landfills. You've really got to think about the risks you're trying to explain. So you can't communicate about something unless you know what it is. So these are ones that would all be familiar to you. Soil contamination from leaking and abandoned pesticide drums. In Australia, it was shocking about 30 years ago. It was terrible. And we did some good campaign work there. the photo on the far side with the real estate is a sad tale. It's a sterilised land near my area, in my area, the Hawkesbury River in Hawkesbury district in New South Wales, where we've got land that can't be sold really because of the PFAS contamination from a defence base. So the sterilisation of land, as some of you would be very familiar, is a real issue. And I guess we can't go back and blame and talk about blame, but the fact is that the uncontrolled, allowing these things to be continually uncontrolled, is, as we've already got the proof, it doesn't work. We get sterilised land, and that would be in Vietnam too. I'm sure that we'll hear from our colleague in a little while. And the biosolid contamination, I think, is one that should prick our ears up, because there's all that talk about the circular economy. Great idea, sounds terrific. Beware, be careful what you wish for, because of course the biosolid contamination of soils, agricultural soils, is a well-known issue. And now we've got the issue of PFAS in biosolid contamination. There's solutions to that, but of course everything costs money. There's limited budgets. And of course, one well identified by the FAO for years is over-fertilisation. So they're the sort of risks we'd be trying to explain. Next slide, please. And this is a definition from the Commonwealth of Australia. It's 10 years old. And it sees the risk communication as an interactive process between individuals, not just scientists to the public, but explaining the nature, severity, and acceptability of risks. A key focus on this definition is that you want to get people to accept a risk. And a lot of people don't want to. That zero risk thing is very, very common. But of course, if you want to communicate the risk and say, look, it's quite acceptable because we can do this and this and this. So it's really quite a new area, really, that's just starting to come into its own. Next slide, please. So just quickly, key attributes of effective risk communication. Oh, there's many more than this, but this is what I think are the main things. Well-structured and written and spoken language. That's a whole presentation in itself, because in my experience, I find that many people cannot use verbs properly, and that they cannot explain probability and possibility when explaining risks, and that they confuse risk and hazard. It's amazing how many people don't know the difference between risk and hazard. That's another more detailed thing. Well-designed imagery, not too much bling, the right colours, not too much fuss, thinking about the user, how they will see the image, and key terms, technical terms that are presented and their meaning explained. And I think these last ones, it's got to reflect an understanding and respect for social and cultural context. And we're here from all countries all over the world. And we know that the way we present risks does have to respect the social and cultural context. And that really requires you to be aware of your stakeholders and to work with them so that you get the right message across. And the one I did mention to Sergius about linguistic sensitivity, I've always wondered how English language translates into languages that are not the European languages, into the different languages in which key terms translate well and which don't. So I think linguistic sensitivity is important. And of course, it's obvious, but it's not always done well. Something we can learn. Effective risk communication is tailored to meet different stakeholder information needs. Not everyone needs the same amount of information. So it's a case of not too little, not too much. Next slide, please. And I think that's is that the end? Yeah, so this is my final one. These are the points about strengthening technical and promoting experience. So the INSOP professional should have high quality information about the risks, examples are really important about things that work. A lot of policy people, they have so many problems. All the time someone brings them problems. This has to happen. If you say, look, this is already working, these are already working here, or this good example here, are designed to reduce the pollution risk. So you always bring the benefit of your, approach with a strong take-home message about the tangible benefits that pollution reduction brings. So not only mentioning risk, but mentioning benefit. That's the key thing, not to just focus on the risks, but the benefits that the work of INSOP, for example, would bring. And of course, follow up, consistency in messaging, always, often, different silos, different groups, different working groups. They might think they're consistent, but they might not be, always needs to be checked. And information delivered is best when mixed with images and text. And of course, we've got lots and lots of news clips to pick from. Next slide, I think that would be farewell. Thank you very much. So think it before you frame it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. What a wonderful presentation. And I think we've learned a lot about how to communicate the risks. The linguistic sensitivity is really important for all of us to understand, always not to, formulate our risks from the negative side. We'll also think about benefits. What can it bring afterwards you cope with the risks? And it's quite interesting that you mentioned about the differences between risks and hazards. So my question to you, from your experience, what do you see more people prefer to use, the risks or the hazards when they communicate one or the other?
Well, to explain the risk, you have to say it's definite. The technical definition of risk is risk equal hazard plus exposure. So the hazard is the property of a substance that brings forward danger. So it's the property of a substance. This is into English. A risk is about probability. It's the probability that that hazard will, that there will be exposure to the hazard. So in fact, there was some work done by Shear and a European guy. It was published, I put it in that last thesis, that looked at institutional definitions of risk and institutional definitions of hazard. And this is like major European organizations and ones from the Americas. And there were 14 different definitions, I think, of risk and 10 of hazard. And he was like a linguist sort of guy, Shear. I think he's Dutch. But it was based on what function each organization had. So they took a definition that tied in with their jurisdictional oversight. And we know in science that we have one language, in empirical science, there's one language. We can't have different ideas about what mercury's toxicity is or what the molecular weight of something is. But unfortunately, in this world of over-democratized language, people think they can make their own definition. So hazard, it's best done with a photo. So a photo of an asbestos shard in soil, and then the dandelion photo, which is the dandelion being blown in the wind, whereby the dandelion represents the hazard and the risk is that it being airborne. I should have put that in, but I couldn't fit it all in. But it's a really good thing to workshop with colleagues and to test yourself, and you'll have a lot of laughs actually when you realise that you've confused risk and hazard. It's quite common. In fact, when I did the interviews for the research, even like very senior people, I asked them to make definitions of about 15 technical terms to find out if people understood what they were and could explain their meaning. So you can understand what it means yourself, but you might not be able to explain it. This is the very interesting area in human communication. So I'd always suggest test yourself first and think about the images that you can show people.
Great. Thank you very much for explanation. We have two hands raised. I see the first hand was raised by INSOP Chair Ravi Naidu. Ravi, good evening. Also join us from Australia. Please unmute your microphone and we're ready for your comments or question.
Thank you very much, Saj, Kate, as always, excellent presentation. Thank you for that. And of course, Kate was one of the CRCK PhD fellows as well. Kate, your presentation, and clearly agree with Saj's as well. Excellent presentation. Your presentation included nature of pollutants and also a bit on remediation as well. But for me, key thing that I would like to hear from you is what makes the community tick the way they do, what makes them react. Because once we know that, then risk communication could also be articulated that way. So this is something which I see from communities, but I want to hear from you. What makes them click?
Yeah. Would you be thinking of like ordinary people in an ordinary community? I don't mean ordinary people, but lay people who are living their lives. They're living in Sydney, or they're living in Williamtown, or they're living in, the Hunter, in a town or something, and they have an issue. So the thing that affects people what makes people tick is unfortunately not what makes scientists tick, because of the training, and especially these days it rolls off the tongue, in the days now we're in the world of digital media and social media, and it's so true that people are more and more governed by immediate emotions, what we call a heuristic response. They see something and it's called heuristics, an immediate response. And then the more rational response can come later if they're given time. People don't have time. But I think what makes people tick is what threatens them, what threatens what they've got in the world. If they're worried by something that's coming up, it can be amplified by social media, and is to the detriment often. It's a big topic, but it's that difference
Yes.
rather between empirical risk and risk perception, and that's a whole other area. But it's got to do with how the individual sees the risk, and it's got a lot to do with their memory and their past experience. I think that sounds a bit general, but it's most people. Life is just hard enough as it is, and you're bringing in new things that will challenge them, and they'll have to think. So a lot of people just step back and say no. No is the default position of a lot of communities these days, and that is where effective risk communication should come in.
Absolutely, and from some of the work that I have done, stigma seems to rank very high. The property value rank pretty high. To the impact on their health and children's health. Those were the three things that stood out for me. Just communicating with people, and then your line, how you do that. Just I know we have limited time, so probably Sargis might like to move to the next.
Thank you very much, Robin. We have one more question, last question, before we're going to go to Arthur. We see Bernd, raise your hand. Bernd, good afternoon. Bernd joined us from Germany, our active INSOP member. Please go ahead, your question or comment to Kate.
Hello, good afternoon from Germany. Yeah, so many thanks for your presentation, and it is amazing, and I'm really impressed what you said. And I'm going a little bit to the politics and daily politics. So and almost the same as Ravi said. So the problem I feel is we are scientists in a way. And but nowadays we are in a kind of post-COVID pandemic period, and I feel many people either just don't believe the politics, or on the other hand, they are afraid of the hazard, not of the risk. And you can tell whatever you want to tell, they're just afraid of anything. And I wonder sometimes, how can I communicate with people from a scientific side and filling the gap between science and policy in a way?
Well, that brings up that vexed issue of mandated science, when science is used for policy making, from the Latin mandeo. mandated science, or they call it regulatory science, when you've got to bring a scientific assessment, say, of a toxicity of something into a regulation. And there is a point where values come in, you know, your value selection, and that's your risk selection, you know, the upper bound confidence of risk. And people say, well, I don't want to be in that 100,000 group. I don't want any risk. But I think actually, since you're from Germany, do you know that wonderful, or we could chat, that wonderful German philosopher Ulrich Beck, who wrote Risk Society? Read it. It was written, it's brilliant, 1986, Ulrich Beck, Risk Society. There's a German society. That's where I learned all, sorry, I've got to go now, learned all the things. But a lot of the time, I think showing people what works is important. We found that going on field trials, showing people the technology, bringing something to them and saying, look, this is something that we've developed, actually showing people artifacts, taking people to places, championing those, and never ever disparaging those who are negative, or even avoiding the wry smile, but making sure there's always strong direction, and not allowing the squeaky wheel to upset discussions. That requires strengths and leadership, and often scientists aren't the best place to do that. That's not what they're good at. That's what I found. I hope that helps a bit. You have many things you have to do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to wrap up with this topic, but I see that we can continue discussion for hours, because this topic is really touching all of us. Kate, many thanks for joining us such a late hour, 10 p.m. It's 10:37 now in Australia. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if we will have more questions, I'll forward them to you from one of the participants. And as I said, we will share all the recordings and the presentations early next week. Thank you very much, Kate. And let's move on to our next speaker, who is joining us from the Joint Research Center, European Union, Arthur Vendrich. Arthur, are you here with us?
Hello, Sergejus. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, good.
Arthur, happy to see you. So Arthur, if you're ready, you can share your screen with us and your presentation.
Okay, can you
colleagues,
see my
many
screen?
of you know that European Joint Research Center, especially for those in Europe, we've seen new maps on arsenic mapping in the European topsoils. I think some other have trace elements already available, if I'm not mistaken, by Lucas, but arsenic is the new one. So we're quite eager to hear from Arthur about the new tools and the methodologies of how arsenic in the European topsoil was generated and produced by the GRC. Arthur, 15 minutes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Sergejus. Well, so thanks for the introduction. And I'm Arthur, and the title of the presentation is Arsenic in European Topsoils as a Soil Health Indicator. And the goal is to tell us how we went from the Lucas data that Sergejus said before to this soil degradation indicator that we use in the context of soil health. So this work was not done by myself alone. We also had co-authors that are listed here. And today, Professor Felipe Junta is also here to answer our questions afterwards if you have them. So feel free to ask. Sorry. Introduction, what's arsenic and why it matters? So arsenic, as many of you here probably know, it's a heavy metalloid trace element, meaning that it's present everywhere on Earth, but at low concentrations. It's present in plant defoliants, pesticides, herbicides, and other products, such as batteries, for example. It was one of the first elements in the world that were identified as cause of cancer. This happened in the 19th century, very early. And the contact with arsenic is associated with increased risk of liver, kidney, lungs, and bladder tumors, as well as other diseases. And it is estimated that around the world, 226 million people are exposed to the risks of arsenic contamination. So in agricultural areas, more specifically, we can have accumulation of residuals after the repeated application of products. It can be both organic or inorganic arsenical products. We can have redeposition of atmospheric arsenic near areas with mining and smelting activities. And once in the soil, the arsenic can attach to the solid phase of the soil. It can be uptaken by plants and then consumed by people afterwards, or it can be volatilized back into the atmosphere, or it can also leach to groundwater. And then when we want to assess the risks of arsenic, first question that we have is what's the spatial distribution of arsenic? Here I'm talking about total arsenic in European topsoils. And these are the 3 works that we find currently published about this subject using different databases, also published in different years. So the first one from 2008 used the FOREX database. You see this N here is the number of points used in these works. And they had around 1,600 points. They developed their map. And then 5 years later, GEMA's database, a data set a bit bigger, 2,200 points. And then finally, 3 years later, we have Lucas with almost 10 times the number of points, 23,000 observations. And the first thing that comes to my mind when we look at these maps is that the distribution of arsenics is still relatively uncertain. So if we take a look, for example, in the south of France, we have some agreement that concentrations are high. So they agree in space, but they do not agree necessarily in magnitude. So in FOREX, for example, this red patch is associated with 37 milligrams per kilogram, while here in GEMA's, this is just more than 20. We don't know exactly the value. And Lucas, this is around between 10 and 20. So even if we have this agreement, it's still not very aligned in terms of magnitude. And there are regions that we simply have disagreements. So for example, Germany, you have in the 3 maps, 3 different patterns. And the obvious question that we pose then is which one should we trust? And we have to be careful answering this question, because if we just focus on the most straightforward criteria here, the number of points, we would guess that FOREX is worse than GEMA's, which is worse than Lucas, but this might not be the case necessarily just because of the number of points used. So when we take a closer look at this question, we see that each of these works, they have some methodological limitations that can be improved if we want to have a reliable assessment of arsenic. So for example, in GEMA's, they obtained this map by simply making a spatial interpolation of the points, which is useful for many environmental variables, climate, for example, but not necessarily for soils. We know and we expect the arsenic concentrations to be correlated with other soil properties. And FOREX and Lucas, they try to establish these correlations, these relationships, let's say, but they use linear assumptions. And we know that in soil chemistry, we very rarely have linear relationships. Most often we have interactions going on. So these are not taken into account. And then we go to the most severe limitation of all, in our opinion, which is the very high limit of quantification. For sure, all of you working with soil already faced this problem before. So what's the limit of quantification? Is the value, is the maximum value below which we are not able to distinguish really what's going on. So for example, we take a soil sample where we know in advance that arsenic content is 1.5 milligram per kilogram. Then we bring this sample to the lab and we expect the lab to tell us 1.5. But what we found here is that the lab methods used, they were not able to distinguish if it was 0 or 2.83, for example. So what we get is just lower than 2.84. This means that for a very large number of samples, we have essentially a very limited information about them. So for the whole continent, for the 23,000 points, 46% of the samples had this limitation. In statistics, this is called data censoring. And in some regions, such as Estonia, for example, this corresponds to 80% of the samples. And then the question that we had is that, can we make a better use of this data? So for instance, here in this work of 2016, this map, what they did, they removed these censored observations. And this is bad because in the end, we can, if we remove the low values, then we might be overestimating the risk because we are only looking at the high values. Also, if we calculate average values for the EU or per country, probably our values are distorted for the same reason because we're not looking at the low values. And another problem that comes from this is that we cannot assess human contamination. So we have literature suggesting that natural concentrations of arsenic in Europe are around 1.5 milligram per kilogram. And using the Lucas data directly, we are not able to tell where these points are. And as I said, we may have to discard information like they did previously. And this is again, not ideal, because then we lose data. Data is expensive. We end up losing money. No one wants that. And the problem, this kernel of the problem, is that most techniques, they are not made for sensor data. So in order to attack this problem, our proposal was to develop new method that could handle this limitation in the data. So our proposed solution is here. You see these 3 boxes, and they are the general framework adopted. It's a standard methodology. We have our samples, we develop a model, and we produce our outputs. But we worked more in this box in the middle. So what we did instead, so you saw in the other maps that they were, let's say, predicting one value, so the point estimate for arsenic concentration. What we do instead, we embrace the uncertainty and we treat them as a random variable. So we have a statistical probability distribution function for every grid cell. And for this probability distribution, we can calculate different things. For example, the median arsenic concentration, or the probability of arsenic to be higher than a given value. But you see here in these curves that they are not regular curves, let's say, because in the left you have this black dot. And what's this black dot? It's a probability mass. So it's calculated by integrating the curve from 0 to 2.84. And what we get by definition of statistics is the probability of being left censored. So in the end, we have a model that is able to look both at the right and left tails at the same time, given the observation we have. And what we show in this work is that with extra assumptions, we can even try to reconstruct this left tail that's missing from the data. And we do that because both parts of the distribution are coupled. So if we have higher values, then we reduce our probability. And if they're close to the left, then this increases. And of course, this requires an extensive validation that we did in this work. I will show it to you in the end. And this distribution or regression is coupled to a random forest that is able to capture these high order variable interactions that I mentioned previously. And just to clarify here, this random forest is not predicting the concentrations directly. Instead, it's predicting the parameters of this distribution that models the arsenic concentration in topsoil. And from these distributions, then finally, after this extensive procedure, we can derive some interesting outputs. For example, the median concentration of arsenic in Europe, the exceedance probabilities. We can incorporate other databases such as GEMAS, for example. And yeah, it's a very flexible framework that we developed in the end. So here I take 3 points, an example, A, B, C. You can see that they are in different regions in Europe. And here you have from 0 to 10, the arsenic concentration and the corresponding probability distribution function. And when we look here in terms of probability, we have B higher than C, higher than A, meaning that the chance of having low values in B is higher. So it's in the north here. And here in the left is the reconstruct left tail that we have. And as you can see, this model can naturally invert this relationship when we go to higher concentrations, giving a higher chance of having, for example, 10 milligrams per kilogram. So some things that we can derive here, we can look at the left tail and calculate the probability of being greater than 1.5. As I said, this is sometimes referred to as natural background concentration in the literature. And of course, in this case, the probabilities are very high because the chance of being natural is very low, except for some places in the north. So here, for example, the chance of being more than 1.5 is less than 50%. Or we can look again to the right tail, where we have the high concentrations, where we have probably contamination somewhere, and we can get the probability of being higher than these values. And this is very interesting for those of you who work, for example, in risk assessment, because very often you have to do Monte Carlo simulations, for example, and then you do your literature review, and you get your mean and standard deviation. You make your assumption that the data is Gaussian distributed, but that's often not true, as you can see here. So, for example, this curve of B is bimodal, is not well represented by Gaussian distributions. And so we hope that this framework can help in other applications as well, not only this soil degradation that we are talking about today. So then finally, after developing this model, we have to go back to the beginning and change our question. So what are acceptable thresholds to define degradation? So as I said, we have this reference of 1.5. This is not a consensus, but it's there. And if we go to local legislation, then we have, again, a lot of variation in Finland, varying from 5 to 45 in Belgium. 20 in Germany. We have a health risk assessed as 40 milligrams per kilogram in the literature. And this list is endless. If we go to other countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, ECA guidelines, we have a different value for each of these because of different methodologies and everything. So in the end, what we decided was to use the highest one among them, the 45, also because it's close to the health risk. So it's kind of a conservative assumption that we made. And from this map of exceedance probabilities, then we rank them. We pick the pixels that have the highest chance of exceeding this 45 milligram per kilogram threshold. And then we reclassify this map, and we have our areas that we consider as potentially degraded because of arsenic concentration. So in the end, if you go now to the European Soil Observatory Soil Degradation Dashboard, that's the map that you see. And now you know a little bit more of how it was developed from the Lucas database that we had. And finally, just going back again to the first question I posed here, why arsenic matters. So here, this was focused on the soil degradation, but arsenic is present in other EU legislation as well. So in the Zero Pollution Action Plan, for example, arsenic and other substances are considered as high priority because of their high toxicity. Arsenic is one of the descriptors in the soil monitoring law. And arsenic also touches the subject of food safety. So we have the Commission regulation number 465 that aims at reducing arsenic in food products. For sure, we need further work to evaluate this matter, but we hope that our map will help as a starting point for these efforts. Thank you. This is my contact. If you have any questions, you're free to ask. And here's a picture of the publication that we made based on this work that I present to you. It's public available, and also the data is publicly available as well in SDAC, our data center. So thank you. I hope you liked.
Great. Thank you very much, Arthur. Indeed, we really liked it. I already see great comments, and thank you for the presentation. Actually, for that publication that you just showed in the last slide, would you be able to provide the link on the chat box so that everyone can go into the Science Direct or whatever? Where is this?
Yes, of course. I'll put there soon.
Facilitate. Great. Thank you very much for showing this databases of the arsenic and for showing the final results of arsenic. Colleagues, oh yes, we see the publication here that Arthur joined. Colleagues from the participants, do you have any questions to Arthur? We have some minutes to ask questions. Please feel free to raise your hand and use the opportunity while the guys from the European Commission is here. Meanwhile, Arthur, I see we have a question in the chat. Interesting question. So, how high is high or low is low or acceptable is acceptable must ultimately be judged from effects of exposure. So the question is how much information is available from cross-sectional studies to ascertain this information?
Yeah, good question. So when we were searching for this threshold to answer how high is high and how low is low, the most, how can I say, maybe precise, straight to the point answer that we found was a study, a risk assessment that was made some years ago, where they were quantifying the risk of some pathways of contamination. So for example, it's common for kids to put their hands in the soil and then in the mouth. No, it's a common pathway, and they were trying to quantify how high arsenic has to be for this contamination to happen in the process. And they quantified it at around 40 milligrams per kilogram using data from the US in the 80s. And we could not find an updated version of this study yet. So yeah, as I said, we used 45 in the degradation dashboard, also partly guided by this value. But maybe if Philippe is here, he can answer you more precisely in terms of the chemistry of arsenic, because now our future efforts try to focus not only on total arsenic, as I presented to you, but on transfer functions for exchangeable, extractable arsenic and other that are more relevant for public health.
Yes, I see Felipe is here. Felipe, good to see you.
Hello, Sergeius. Yeah, no, just to confirm the information from Arthur. Yes, I think, yeah, maybe the question is not if what is the high or what is the low. Maybe the question is because in this work is very nice modeling approach in order to try to quantify the data that is more in terms of the technical approach, try to estimate the data lower than limit of quantification or limit of detection. But maybe the question could be if we are using the right soil fraction, as already mentioned by Arthur, because in Lucas, GEMAS, and other European soil databases, we are using the total concentration of the different heavy metals. The question would be if we are using the right approach in terms of is this fraction the fraction that finally we can correlate with the risk of human health ecosystem? In order to find some answer for this question, in the new Lucas 2022, we are trying to make an additional determine additional soil fraction for the different metals and metalloids. No, the idea is to take the information not only in terms of the total or total concentration by using aquarella or whatever, but also I think it's important to take the information related with the bioavailable fraction or extractable fraction or other additional fractions in order to take the general picture of the the behavior of the pollutants in soil, but take into consideration the reactivity or the natural response of the soils. I think this is the most important. And also, if we're working with this another soil fractions, by a variable fraction or whatever, I think this type of approach introduced by Arthur is very nice. Because in this case, if we are analyzing another fraction, probably the concentration of the metals is lower, and if we are using this type of ICP mass, yes, we can determine this low concentration. But if we are using ICP optical or another technical approach, maybe this model could be very nice to estimate these values lower than limit of quantification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felipe. And we have one hand by INSOP chair. Ravi, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Sarges. The question how high is high, and noting that I've worked in arsenic for nearly 20 years. For us, the way we look at the loading of arsenic or any content is against the threshold values. Whether we are looking at environmental threshold values or human health threshold values. If we are looking at human health threshold values, for instance, arsenic is 100 milligrams kilogram. Anything less than that won't be considered that high. Once it starts to exceed, then we get into high and bioavailability. All of those things come into picture as well. So from magnitude and high, it's always good to take into consideration the threshold values. And these threshold values can vary depending on which country you are looking at. Australia is 100, I think. UK is 100 milligrams a kilogram, and the soil values I think is 20. So that's what we take into consideration rather than just looking at numbers.
Thank you, Ravi. Well, I see we're 5 minutes behind the schedule, but last question I think we need to ask, and I would like to hear the opinion of the GRC colleagues. From the chat, Musa Burai, what is the main source or contributor of arsenic in European soils? What do you think, colleagues, GRC, Arthur and Felipe?
I think this just to back for the previous question, because by using the data that we have, I think the geogenic is the most important up to now, no? Because by using this type of fraction, we are analyzing both anthropogenic and geogenic arsenic concentration in the soils, no? But for this also, in the maybe I don't know in the upcoming soil monitoring law, they are provide some of the version. They try to analyze not only the concentration of the metals in soil, but also we have to analyze the background level just to discriminate or to differentiate between the anthropogenic and the natural concentration. But this is my answer.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the third presentation. Arthur, Felipe, thank you very much, colleagues from the GRC, for being with us. And Arthur, I see we have still some questions from Mustaqim Miriam in the chat. So if you can answer that question, because we don't have a time for comments. And I will move on to the third speaker, who will be my colleague from IEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, joining us from Vienna, Maria Hayling. Maria, good afternoon. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for being with us. So, Maria, would you like to share your screen, or would you like me to share your screen? While you're sharing your screen, okay, I can see myself. You can put the presentation.
So do you see it, or was it
we can
fast?
see, but you have to go to the PowerPoint presentation.
So I stop once more because maybe I was too fast.
Or if you want, I can share my screen.
So
and then...
I think it should work, right?
Yeah, well, we can see your screen, but go to Excellent and now go to Display Settings and change the...
Is it the wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, Display Settings and Swap.
Swap, okay. Good.
Excellent.
Okay,
so Maria will talk about emerging contaminants. As said, FAO would like to address microplastics much more in depth, not just awareness raising, but what can we do together with IEA. And for that, I invited Maria to talk about it. And Maria, she is focusing on the isotopes to study nitrogen fertilizer efficiency, biological nitrogen fixation, and more recently, soil pollutants, such as the AMR, antimicrobial resistance, and microplastic. And hence her presentation title, Microplastic and How to Detect It in the Soil. Maria, you have 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that together with the INSOP group, we will move a step further in working on microplastic, a very important pollutant. And I also hope that together we can work on method harmonization and move a step further. So as we have, your group is very diverse, and we heard about arsenic and other pollutants. Just a very short background, what is microplastic? It's defined as plastic of sizes from 1 to 5,000 micrometer or 5 millimeter. So this is a quite huge range, which needs different kind of analytical methods, equipment, and therefore method harmonization might be challenging. We know plastic has excellent properties. It's perfect to be used in all kinds of areas in our daily life. And this is why we produce that much plastic. So the production increased sadly from 1950 from 1.7 million tons to more than 450 tons today. And the prediction is it will increase. But of course, it also has negative effects. We know that this can be a source for microplastic directly because it can break down. But we also have, indirect, but we also have direct application of microplastic. If you just think of your laundry, the wastewater, the cosmetics where we have microplastic, so it's everywhere. And if it's not treated well, if it's not recycled, it will end up in the soil, which is a long-term thing, and it will have all kinds of issues. And probably this also will lead to marine and water pollution because from soil, plastic easily can move into the water bodies. So we are more interested in the negative aspects of microplastic on the ecosystem services. And we know from literature and also our studies have shown that we see a lot of negative impact on soil structure, water retention, on the microbial community, soil health, crop growth, and small plastic sizes, nanoplastic, but also 1 micrometer can enter the food chain as crops can take it up. So what do we know and what we don't know? We have several knowledge gaps. Literature increased, more and more is published on topic of microplastic. But what I hear in conferences, and this is why I contacted the INSOP group, we don't have harmonized methods for sampling and for the analysis. So we talk about different topics, we have different size ranges, we use different chemicals to extract it. So there I think it's an urgent need to agree on something. More a wish for maybe further future, if we find methods to do fast monitoring with less time intensive, less labor intensive methods, it would be great. Maybe we find people in the chat helping with this, or a further goal for further future. What we need to understand is the fate dynamics and impact of microplastic on soils, which is less explored than what is going on in marine environment, probably because of the method, the sample preparation and the analysis. We have less data on this, and we have to continue. And therefore, we have missing tools to support member states in developing policies to effectively manage and bring strategies to minimize plastic pollution. You saw already, I work for the agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, in the Soil Water Management Crop Nutrition Laboratory. Very long titles, but what does this mean? So we belong to the UN family as well as FAO does. So we are independent, we are civil servants. Our aim is to support member states in meeting their sustainable development goals. So this is why I had the idea that we could contribute to this method harmonization. We are not a university, we are not a country, we are independent, and our mandate is to support agriculture and therefore also to tackle pollutants. So amongst the joint FAO-IAR Center, we have 5 groups working in the area of agriculture and corresponding laboratories in Cybersdorf, which is in Austria. And on top of this, we have a group in Monaco. The group works on marine environment, and they're part of the NUTEC Plastic Initiative, which is a technical cooperation project launched by the agency. So they have nice methods, they're very experienced. That's why I want to list them as well. And what did our lab do on this topic? So, and others. So our field is climate smart agriculture. So we worked a lot on mitigation and adaptation of climate change. We have monitoring and managing soil contamination and pollutants, and land and water management. As we work for the agency, we always try to include isotopes and nuclear techniques to our research if it gives a benefit to classical or conventional techniques. How we bring our knowledge to member states, we do applied research and development, so we are mandate driven, and we also offer capacity building. This can be training of fellows, interns, we host PhD students, we have training courses, and we also produce guidelines and protocols. On top of this, we coordinate research projects. This is from the agency a way to include member states, but of course not as big as FAO can do or the INSOP group. So we are limited to members in this kind of projects. So coming to the lab work and what we really do in the lab in Cybersdorf, we have the possibility to use isotopes in incubation experiments with microplastic to monitor soil organic matter stability and microplastic degradation. We produced an SOP for microplastic, which we maybe can use as a basis or to further work on this harmonization. And we have this coordinated research project, which I mentioned already. So how does such an soil incubation experiment work? You can have different kind of containers which are gas tight. You have your soil, you add your plastic, different kind of plastic, different sizes, different soils. different kind of fertilizer or other amendments, and you measure the CO2 produced by the microbial community. And if the carbon isotopes vary between soil and your plastic, you can use a two-component mixing model approach, and you know how much is coming from your plastic degradation and how much from your soil. And what we saw that microplastic influences the microbial activity. It induced the soil organic carbon losses through priming effect. We didn't see a big effect on plastic size of one particular polymer, and nitrogen fertilizer has a big effect. This might be is very relevant if we talk already about dealing with contaminated soils, and maybe further on also for mitigation. It's not just the plastic and the soil, it's also other amendments, fertilizer, and so on. The extraction method is based on the Minagris protocols. Minagris is the micro and nanoplastic in agricultural soils of the EU, and 2 universities started already to produce an SOP. Our aim is always to illustrate the SOPs with many pictures and have a step-by-step protocol. We included degradable plastic and tires and focused on plastic bigger than 300 micrometer because this allows more labs to contribute. You need an ATR for the identification and not so much fancy equipment, which I will show you later. As we're the agency, we're also interested in the stability of the isotopes, so we assess this on top of this. Now coming to the coordinated research project with the title Assessing the Fate and Environmental Impact of Plastic in Soil and Crop Ecosystems Using Isotopic Techniques. This started in 2023 and will go on until 2028. The aim of this research project is to develop, evaluate, and apply isotopic and related techniques for understanding the fate and impact of plastic and microplastic in agricultural soils, to provide knowledge and guidance to help minimize the negative impact of plastic and microplastic on soil health and ecosystems. So what are our expected outputs? And here I think this is very similar to the approach of the INSOP. So we want to produce harmonized protocols for sampling, analysis, and data interpretation, but we also want to establish a network of experts and laboratories for training and analysis of microplastic to support our member states. But as I said already, we are limited in numbers of partners. So we have 9 countries contributing, but they are all excellent centers and experienced in the work with microplastic and have all kind of fancy equipment where I don't have enough time to go into detail. But the spectroscopic method is maybe the most relevant because this is used for identification, and I mentioned already the ATR. We try to use isotopes and have all kinds of fancy electron microscopes and so on. But let's more focus on what we can do, and what I hope INSOP can help us is my wish to upscale at global level the microplastic monitoring. So what we need is to produce consistent, reliable, and comparable data. So we need good SOPs. Later, we can offer trainings, workshops, and on long term, we should facilitate the collaboration and inform policy and regulation. But all this can only be done if we have reliable data as a basis to do so. So I was thinking to call for 3 working groups on, one could be the extraction in the laboratory from the soils, maybe also sediments, sewage sludge, but mainly soils. We need to focus on the identification and quantification. I said we have microplastic is 1 to 5,000 micrometer. That means we have what Monaco calls elephant plastic, bigger than 300 micrometer, but also the tiny ones, which is very challenging because you easily can contaminate your samples. So this can be a working group by itself, and also the reporting. So we have in the literature, you see particle numbers according to different particle size ranges, or percentage, weight-based, volume-based. So in the field, we also might need to have good bulk density measurements. But sampling in the field, I think FAO did a lot in your group. So maybe this can be already a basis and easily be adapted. But these three groups, I think, are the most important ones. And I also was thinking to start with typical plastic in agriculture, which is listed in the call for action of FAO, and also the ethylene vinyl acetate I took from the European side. So if we start with the main plastics, which we expect to find in soils, this could be the basis to identify which density our reagent need to have for the density separation, for example. And yeah, this is, I tried to stick to this 15 minutes. It is a lot of information, but I really want to use the opportunity to discuss and to share with you your opinion and how we can move a step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's a well-informative presentation on microplastic. You can stop sharing your screen. Great. Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, very interesting presentation on microplastic, and I really hope that INSOP and IEA will collaborate together, that we will be able to mobilize experts, identify laboratories around the world, and produce a consistent, reliable, and comparative product at the end on how to determine and quantify microplastic in the soil, or perhaps sewage sludge as well. Colleagues, do we have any questions to Maria or in general to INSOP about microplastic? The reason why we started talking about microplastic is, remember, Ravi and Dei, last year we had a lot of discussion about microplastic and that INSOP must start address this contaminant, and hence throughout the discussion with Maria and the other colleagues from IEA, we believe that producing an SOP will be a very good start for us. Although we're already tackling plastic pollution through the soil doctors program, but that's more in preventative measures. And here we'll be more on measuring and quantifying it.
Yes, I see there are also partners from our CRP in the chat. So I think there was one about sharing, right?
I'm just going through the chat.
Oh, yeah. Because as soon as something new comes, it is moving. So regarding the SOP, we have something ready which works nice for 300 and bigger micrometer, but we are just one laboratory. I really would like a bigger group to test it on different kind of soils, and also maybe to improve with some tips, tricks from others. So this was the idea, and that's why I contacted Sergius to start. And I think with our role as being an independent civil servant or UN organization, we can start to work on this. But I see a hand up.
Yes, we have a hand from Kan Turgay. Good afternoon, Kan, joining us from Turkey.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I would like to thank you, Maria, for this wonderful presentation. Focused on the problem of soil pollution, but we have to take care of the potential solution on the other hand. And as your colleagues probably know, the fact that there is a growing interest on the materials alternative, the plastics Actually, there is a very well-known terms for that, plastic culture. So we cannot give up all plastics easily, because of this problem. So we need to find alternative materials that we can replace with plastics in the long run. So in this perspective, bio-based and biodegradable materials, for example, textile materials, are actually good examples of these solutions. But again, we need methodology to go in that way, just like improving methodology to study microplastic accumulation or extraction. So I was wondering if the institution of Maria any effort on that side, the measurement of alternative materials to replace with plastics in soil.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was the idea that we started with degradable plastic. So we used polylactic acid, for example, which is not really soil degradable, but it's one of these bioplastic. We have so many terms which are also not defined. In newspapers, you find other names as the scientific community uses. So we try to see the effect of this polylactic acid on the soil stability, soil organic carbon matter, and it seems that it breaks down the carbon. So I think what we don't have enough data on to do risk assessment with these new materials. We talk about the classical plastics, but is it the right way just to say, okay, replace all the mulch foil, for example, with degradable plastic? We have to know that this degrades in special incubators and doesn't necessarily mean that it will break down in soils. So if we still start accumulating, is this really better than having thicker material which you can remove and you force for recycling? So this is why we started this kind of work, and then also this extraction method to understand the picture better. There's also, Austria is very proud that we banned the oxyplastic. So this is just where you have some kind of particles in between that the plastic breaks and you produce microplastic. So you will not see it, but it's still there. So in some countries, I think UK, it's still allowed. Europe, I think, is banning it. So there are many areas where we can do something without saying, okay, we avoid any plastic in agriculture. This we can't. We will use this plastic. We have irrigation pipes. We have the plastic foils, but we have to go for the best practice. And on top of this, you might know the volunteer code of conduct of the FAO, where maybe we can ban some plastics with certain additives. If we know that these additives are very bad for the microbial community, we might ban them. So there are easy solutions and some where it will take time to find a better way. But recycling for sure is one way to think of. But also I think we need more data, what is really going on in the soil with the soil microorganisms and soil health. And there I think you see the publications are really going up, but there is still more to be done. And then if we talk about different things, if everybody has his own way of defining the plastic size ranges, and we want to, for example, compare the plastic size, how can we do so? Yeah. So I think if we agree on at least these ranges, we move already a step further in the scientific community to talk about the same topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Han, for a question. Thank you very much, Maria, for answering. Last question, although the chat is burning, Maria, I think if you can support me in answering those questions through the written because we don't have time to answer all of them now. But the last one that I would like to comment, and I think our INSOP Vice Chair Day, who is here, because the question is coming from China, Peng Yu, asking, we intend to implement in China a regenerative agricultural project in China next year, which will focus on the impact of microplastic on soil partially. May I know if any recommendations on the testing agencies in China with the recognized methodology for soil microplastic testing? Thank you. Any comments?
Uh, so we have a partner in our CRP. It's the, maybe my pronunciation is wrong, Kunming Institute of Botany, Chinese Academy of Science. I can make contacts if this helps. So for collaboration, or?
I see Peng is here. Peng, would you like to comment on your question? Peng, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, good evening, Maria. Thank you so much for presentation. The contact is just like this. We are going to implement a project, a REDAG project, and we'd like to cooperate with a recognized a corporation who can help us to test the microplastic in the soil. Yeah, in China, although they try to search for some help, but we are not sure they are following a well-recognized methodologies so far. So if I can get your help, thank you on this.
So, I mean, for sure, I'm not the right person to say what is well recognized. So we have different methods of bigger institutes than our laboratory can cope with. That's why I think we should work on this harmonization and then agree on something. There are many good protocols available. We can communicate in written if you want, and I can give you the contact. Our CRP started already, so no new members can join. But the members of China, they might be a good partner for you and for your project, and we can organize this.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Later on, we send some emails.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm afraid we have to move, but Maria, I see there's also a very interesting question in the chat that you can support us in answering from Tapati, from Mustaqim. Giagon have an interesting question, and others. So please stay with us and support us in the chat box. Meanwhile, yes, as I said, if INSOP members will be interested, starting from next year, we will formulate those working groups that Maria presented in her presentation, and try to develop a global SOP on microplastic. I think that'll be a very great product that all of us, I see there's almost 140 participants here, but there's more of us who couldn't join today. I think we can mobilize experts from all around the world and share our knowledge together. Thank you very much, Maria. And let's move on to our fourth speaker, joining us across the Atlantic, right from the Kansas State University in the USA. Good morning, Hu Tuan. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice.
Hu, if you can share your screen while I briefly introduce you. So Hu is joining us from the Kansas State University, where he's currently doing his postdoctoral research. And his topic will be focusing on dioxin pollution in Vietnam from the last century as a result of military activity during the Vietnam War, and its impacts on the environment and human health, and what kind of remediation practices we can look at it. Yes, we can see your screen in full, so please go ahead, 15 minutes.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. So yes, hi everyone. So nice to meet you, all of you today. So today I'm very excited to deliver a talk related to one of the hot topics in my country, in Vietnam, military impact area and also dioxin pollution in Vietnam. So even though the American war ended more than 40 years ago in Vietnam, however, it's still persistent effect to the culture, society, ecological, and also the human health. And as you may know, or as you know or may not know, the Agent Orange chemical pesticide were used during the war still remain in the environments. and become to the major concern. It has resulted in millions of the victims and still continue to expect to the individual and also the community group to this day. So this is why today my presentation will focus on the Asian orange and dioxin and also the dioxin hotspot in the southern part of the Vietnam. So what is the Asian orange? So Asian orange were chemical herbicide defoliants used by the U.S. military during the Vietnam War from 1961 to 1971. Yeah, so why they call the iron orange? Actually, the U.S. military they use different kind of the chemical pesticide with different color, the blue, the white, and also the green. However, the orange pesticide, the most dominant with the last of the volume. So this why they assume that this is the iron orange. So between 1961 to 1971, the U.S. Army displayed more than 80 million lists of iron orange. And the most important iron orange contain dioxin with the a last volume maybe more than 300 kilograms of dioxin. And the most dangerous is the dioxin with the very highly toxic, including the 2,3,7,8 TCDD container. So what is the dioxin? So dioxin is not dioxin in the general name. It's not only one compound. It's general name of 210 containers. So in general, dioxin can be divided two main groups. We call polychlorinated dibenzodioxins. And in this group, we have 75 containers. And the second group is PCDFs, polychlorinated dibenzofurans, with 135 containers. Totally, we have 17 containers with the toxic, in which 2,3,7,8 TCDD, as I mentioned, the most toxic. How we can evaluate the toxic of dioxin? So we always use the TEQ, toxic equivalent factor, to evaluate the toxic of dioxin. So TEQ equal dioxin concentration multiple to TEF. TEF is toxic equivalent factor. And you should be aware that at different container, we have different toxic, different factor. For example, for the 2,3,7,8, TCDD is the most toxic, so the highest the factor compared to other container. Yes, so dioxins belong to the POP group, persistent organic pollutant. This is very highly toxic, and due to the dioxin property, example, this low solubilities, molecular stabilities, lipid. So dioxin can persist and it can accumulate in the environment, especially in the soil and sediment for a long time. Especially for these 2,3,7,8 TCD, the lifetime 50 of TC of this container about 30 to 50 years under natural condition. This why, even though the world passed more than 40 years, however, dioxin concentration still in my country with a loss of the hotspots. So yeah, this is the chemical structure of the BCDD and BCDF. So how dioxin can affect to the humans? So this figure, the figure on the left-hand side, will show you the effect and transportation of dioxins. So dioxin can be accumulated in the terrestrial environment through different ways, the atmospheric environment and also aquatic environments, through different mechanisms, waste and dry deposits, and through the food chains. Dioxin can enter our bodies. Actually, we have different ways of dioxin entering to the human body through inhalation, ingestion, skin contact. However, as far as I know, more than 90% of dioxins go to our body through the food chains. And then, yes, dioxin are highly toxic and it can cause first the most dangerous the cancer, birth defect, and damage the immune system. This is why dioxin become to the most or one of the most topics, the most major concern in Vietnam. Yes, yeah, based on the ministry, Vietnamese ministry, and also the U.S. government, they recognize that more than million of Vietnamese were exposed to the herbicide or pesticide, Asian origin, and 3 million was suffer illness caused by their chemical pesticide. This figure will show you the victim of the Asian origin is the Vietnam. Yes, so now we talk about dioxin hotspots. As I mentioned, between 1961 to 1971, the U.S. Army they sprayed a lot of Asian origin in the southern parts of Vietnam. The main reason why they use the Asian origin because they want to eliminate the forest cover and also drop the crops and detect the vehicle spots in the southern parts of the Vietnam. So all the 30,000 square miles in the southern Vietnam sprayed with the Asian Ocean. And 12 provinces of the Vietnam were recognized, have the very highly dioxin concentration. And based on the concentration and the volume of the listed Asian Ocean, we can divide into three main clusters, Da Nang, Phu Cát, and Bien Hoa Air Base. The figure in the right-hand side will show you the TEQ concentration in the soil in some area. And as you can see, Da Nang, Phu Cát, and Bien Hoa show the highest concentration. This higher more than 1,000 times compared to the Vietnamese standard guideline for dioxin in the soil. Yeah, and this figure provide the detailed information about the percentage of the proving spray and also the total area spray. Yeah, as I mentioned before, so based on the area, so we can divide two main trees, or we can call the three main hotspot, dioxin hotspot in Vietnam. Da Nang cluster, including the three provinces, Phu Cát, Bien Hoa, and yes, and until now, Vietnam and US, they do some the right action, do the collaboration to treat the dioxin in Vietnam. And in 2007, the US and Vietnam began to work together to tackle the dioxin and Asian origin in Vietnam on the ground with the technical support from the consultant, also implement some the big company who example for the CDM Smith, Tech and Term, they do the technical support and consultant for the dioxin treatment in our countries. So now I will talk about dioxin contamination in the Da Nang airport. Yeah, Da Nang is central middle of the Vietnam, as you can see. In the north, in the Hanoi, the capital, and the south, in the Ho Chi Minh City, the mega city, the biggest city in the Vietnam. So Da Nang is one of the big cities in the Vietnam. It's located in the central middle of the Vietnam. So from June 2012 to June the 18th, the Vietnam and also the US, we signed a contract. And this contract will focus on the three main objectives. The first, we evaluate the dioxin concentration. And the second one, we eliminate the volume of the dioxin contaminated soil. And the third part, we try to apply the techniques to treat the dioxin in the soil. So actually, as I mentioned before, the dioxin concentration in the Da Nang airport is very high, and the concentration of around 365,000 ppt TQ, more than 365 times the Vietnamese standards for the soil. And about 50,000 cubic meter of dioxin were identified. So based on that, we try to apply the solid techniques or the advanced techniques to treat the dioxin using the in-thermal pilot disruption technology to treat the dioxin in the soil. So yes, in the Dadang with the consultant from the TerraTech and TerraTherm, two big companies with a lot of experiment related to the soil remediation, especially some persistent organic pollutant, example for PAS or PCP. They highly recommend that the institute techniques is the best option, the best solution for us to treat the dioxin in the soil. This is why in this project, we apply the in-pilot thermal disruption technologies to treat the dioxin. And these techniques can be divided into three main parts. The first, we build the pilots. We build the pilots. And the second one, we expect case the contact with soil, and then play the dioxin content soil in the piles. And the third part, the heating the contact soil, the contact with soil and sediment to the high temperature with the temperature around 335 Celsius degrees. This figure in the right side describe the in-pilot thermal disruption. As you can see, we have the three pi, and then we use the power distribution system to maintain the very high temperature. And the vapor, or the VOC will be dissolved using the activity carbons. And then we'll list at the hazardous waste. And then we go to the incinerator to treat the activity carbons. So here are some the image to show the in-pilot thermal disruption techniques, one of the solid techniques to treat dioxin until now. Yeah, the first step, as I mentioned, we try to build the pilots, and the second step is the case contact with soil, all the sediments, and then lay in the pilots. And the last step, they install a lot of the well. As you can see the figure here, this is the well, and they connect to the cable and they try to maintain or operate with the high temperature, and the temperature around more than 300 Celsius degrees.
Oh, 1 minute left.
Sorry?
1 minute left.
Okay. And as a result, until now, more than 95,000 cubic meter of dioxin were treated and cleaned in the Da Nang export. So now I talk to the second dioxin hotspot in Vietnam. This is the Phu Cát SB. Yeah. Even though, just quickly evaluate, even though the dioxin concentration in the Phu Cát lower than in the Da Nang, however, it's still higher than the standard. This is why the USAID and also the Vietnam to try to invest a lot of money and also the advanced technique to treat the dioxin. And until now, more than 7 cubic meter of dioxin were treated. And the good news that the government of Vietnam removed the Phu Cát airport from the list of dioxin hotspots from 2020. So now I talk about the last and the most or the highest the dioxin contaminated in the Vietnam. This is the Bien Hoa airspace where the US Army use as the transportation, and also they save the store loss of the Asian Ocean during the wars. So here, yeah, the Biên Hòa is very closely to the Ho Chi Minh City, just about 20 to 30 km. And uh, this project was signed from 2019 to 2030. Yes. And in this project, we focus on the first identify the dioxin concentration at a different site. Because in the Biên Hòa SB, we have not only the airports, but also have some of the lakes, and also some of the sub-rural area. So the dioxin at a different areas much different. And then after that, they try to apply the techniques. So until now, we apply 3 different techniques, including the thermal desorption, bioremediation, and also the soil washing to treat the dioxin at different level. And the total budget until now about 220 million. Yes, yeah. And as far as I know, in the December 2022, so with the technical support from the Terraterm and also the CDM Smith, we design, construction, and operation of the facility, and also we treat about more than 100 cubic meter with the highly contaminated soil using the thermal treatment, in pilot treatment. Yeah, and this process still ongoing, and it take maybe more than 10 years to totally complete the project, and the total cost up to more than 450 million US dollar. So to sum up, until now, the Asian Ocean still affect to the Vietnamese with a million of the victims. However, with the collaboration between the US and Vietnam governments, so we are doing the right action. And we try to minimize the dioxin level and also the dioxin hotspot in the whole Vietnam. And so from my side at the research, so I'm pursuing the solid techniques to tackle dioxin, in which my research focus on 2 different techniques, including aerobic composting and also the soil washing using different chemical, example for the biosurfactant or agent to treat dioxin at a different concentration. And here some publication, my publication related to the dioxin in contaminated soil in the recent year. So thank you so much for your listening.
Thank you very much for a very indeed touchy presentation. And I think we learned a lot and remembered what the history was all about. And it's good to see that both countries doing the right action, as you mentioned, to alleviate things with the impacts of the Agent Orange has in the country. Thank you very much. I see we have a indeed touchy chat here and some questions in the chat box. If you could support me in answering the chat box while we're in another speaker.
Yes, possible.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I can accept one question. If you have any online questions, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, you're free to ask your questions in the chat box. I think we're still digesting the previous presentation. Thank you very much for being with us. Okay, and last but not least, presentation for today's session. And I see, yes, so we have indeed very great speakers and great presentations. As I said, all of them will be uploaded online very shortly. So now let's move on to our last speaker, Pedro, joining us from Peru. Am I right, Pedro? Buenos dias.
Thank you, Sergejus. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Welcome, Pedro, and we're looking forward to your presentation. You can start sharing your screen and putting your presentation. in the presentation mode. And Pedro is a geological engineer joining us from Peru with more than 10 years experience in the public and private sectors in the mining and environmental area in activities such as of deposit exploration, mineral exploitation, environmental management, and mine closure. He is the coordinator of Latin American Network for Prevention and Management of Contaminated Sites, RELASC. And I'm happy to introduce Pedro's topic, which addresses mining activities and the risk of soil pollution. Pedro, we can see your presentation. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And today I'm going to talk about this important topic for Peru, which is the risk of soil pollution about mining activities. So why mining activity in Peru and not other risks of pollution to soil? Not hydrocarbon extraction or maybe manufacturing. So I will give you some scope about what means mining for Peru. So what is mining for Peru? If we look at the global figures, Peru is a leading mining producer for a lot of metals, and I would like to highlight 5 of them. We are the second larger producer of copper, zinc, and number 3 in the world producing silver, lead, and number 4 tin. Also, Peru produces more than 10 kind of different metals. And just to focus on copper, which is really important for the transition to a cleaner energy system, Peru produces 9% of the total world mining production of copper. So that is like almost 1 piece out of 10 pieces produced by mining. It comes from Peru. So mining is really important in Peru. Also, Peru is important for the world in this kind of production. So what is this world figures means internally? What means it for our country? Mining represents 9.5% of our GDP. Also is the 59% of our exports calculated in amount of revenues. And also mining is 20% of total investment per year in the country. So mining really matters. It's a really huge economical activity in our country. And what's the ecological footprint or environmental footprint of this leading activity in our country, and how is it affecting soil? So what's the risk of soil pollution about this prominent mining activity? To talk about this risk of soil pollution, I will to use the resources nexus approach from the United Nations University, which help us to understand mining activity related to the internexus relationship that this activity will have with not only soil but all the resources. So when we want to talk about soil degradation or soil pollution, it's important for us also focus on space, because mining uses huge areas that maybe formerly was agricultural areas or areas for livelihood production or areas related to conservation. So what's the impact of mining in this kind of resources? Talking about space, talking about the land use. Because when we reduce space, agricultural space, we are affecting also food production. So total Peruvian territory, continental territory, it's 1.25 million square kilometers, and 15% of this territory is given to mining activity. So we have mining concession activities in 15% of our territory. And if we compare these numbers with agricultural land, we can find that by 2021, the Ministry of Agriculture measured that Peru has 116 million square kilometers of agricultural land. So it means 9% of our total surface, it's agricultural land. Meanwhile, 15% of it is destined to mining activity. And if we can see this blue, sorry. If we can see these blue dots, these blue polygons, and these green ones, a lot of them are overlapping in the same area. So that means a lot of agricultural areas, Peruvian agricultural areas, are subject to mining activity. So it's a huge use of land, and it means that less space for other activities. That's the first impact of mining. So the next approach is the soil pollution, and I will like this example of this mining in Peru. This is an actual mining. This image is from Google Earth. So we have in this image the open pit of a mining which has 1 kilometer long average, and this is the tiling dam in this area. And also we have here some rock heaps, waste rock heaps. So the effective area where mining is developed, we can surround like this with the open pit, the processing plant, the waste rock heaps, the tiling dam, and also some areas for raw material. But there is not only those areas affected by mining, because the soil pollution risk, it's also in the area surrounding this effective area of mining activity. So we can identify soil degradation risk. That means the loss of vegetal coverage, also the risk of erosion, acidity, flooding, mass movement, and also landscapes. And if we want to talk about soil pollution risks, we can identify that in those buffer zone close to the effective mining areas, there will a huge risk of soil pollution by heavy metals, also some metalloids like arsenic, and this could be contaminated by some water streams, water runoffs from and also for the groundwater flows and air particulate matters. Also, it could be the release of chemicals in the procedure and the production processes that could be released to the soil. So what's Peru doing about this? How is Peru approaching to protect soil in the mining sector, in the mining activity? So we have this national system of environmental impact assessment, and we can divide it into big groups. The first one is for new mining operations, new projects that will open in the future. They are required to present an environmental impact assessment and detailed environmental impact assessment in order to achieve their environmental license, and in this case they are subject to perform a soil baseline characterization, and it should be done taking in account the environmental quality standards for soil, the Peruvian environmental quality standards, and also the criteria, the contaminated site management criteria. And with those legislations, companies are subject to do this characterization before they impacted those areas, and this will be a point of comparison in the future after the the mining was done, after the mining has impacted the area. And the second group is the already existing minings that already has an instrument for environmental management, those activities that already has environmental license. They are subject to update their instruments for environmental management, and in these updates or modifications, they are subject also to evaluate of potential contaminated sites. And in this evaluation, they should take soil samples in the buffer areas and try to establish a new baseline. It's not a baseline like before the activity began, but it's a comparison for the future, and also it should provide information of if there is already contaminated sites close to these mining activities. And since 2004 in Peru, we have this mining closure framework that is required for mining activities to present a mining closure plan that considers the remediation, rehabilitation, and also the future use of those impacted areas. And how about the orphan mining sites? Also, Peru has this mining environmental liability framework, which establishes for the responsibles who generated these liabilities to present a mining environmental liability closure plan. So this in this document, in this environmental management instrument, the companies are subject to evaluate of potential contaminated sites, and for those evaluations, they should use the environmental quality standards for soil and the contaminated site management criteria. And the goals of these mining environmental liability closure plans are to a long-term physical and chemical stability, also the future use of those remediated lands and alternative uses in the future. So in addition of those regulations, the Ministry of Environment some weeks ago has approved a new guideline for the assessment of contaminated sites and the development of remediation plans. This is within the framework of the environmental quality standards for soil. And what's interesting in these new guidelines, in this new document, that it has five kind of study cases: the main soil pollution types and sampling strategies. So this will be useful for the companies who will assess the potential contaminated sites in orphan sites and also in actual and currently operating mining sites. And what are our next steps and identified next steps are we need to approved the sectorial regulation for contaminated sites in the Office of Mining Environmental Affairs. The environmental impact assessment system, it's a bigger framework for new activities, but the the mining closure plans and mining liability closure plans are evaluated by the Office of Mining Environmental Affairs. So it is required for the authority to approve a sectorial regulation for the contaminated site, and this will help to new mining closure plans take into consideration the environmental soil standards and will perform the characterization of the affected, the buffer affected areas, because previously to the approval of the environmental soil quality standards, a lot of mining closure plans just focus on the physical stabilization and didn't characterize the buffer area or the related areas that is also affected by heavy metals and other pollutants from mining activity. So this will help us to include contaminated site management in the closure plan for mining environmental liabilities, and also they will help us to characterize and remediation for more mining contaminated sites. So we also are looking some new experiences. Peru also has a government enterprise, government company, which is responsible for the remediation of this orphan mining site, which is Activos Mineros. And those remediation activities have been developed since 2006, since 2008. So there is almost 20 years of experience remediating orphan mining sites. And what we are finding is those closure plans, those closures developed 15 years ago, they didn't characterize the buffer areas, the mining buffer areas, the soil in the close to these mining liabilities. And the environmental enforcement agency, it's looking after those areas and it's finding some breakthroughs, because it's finding some concentration of heavy metals in those close areas to these closed mining orphan sites. And we have one experience that the government company, which is Activos Mineros, it's trying to assess again those already closure mining orphan sites. And at this time, they are characterizing soil, and we find that a lot of soil areas close to those orphan mining sites has elevated concentrations of heavy metals. But our problem is about finance, because as it is a government budget, these budgets were approved with the previous environmental legislations that didn't take into account this contaminated site management. So that's why it is important for the Office of Mining and Environmental Affairs to approve a regulation, a sectorial regulation for contaminated sites, based on one that the Ministry of Environment has already approved. Okay, that's all from my side. Hope it will be okay.
Thank you very much, Pedro. It was very interesting to hear what Peru does and what kind of tools it has to control and monitor mining sites in the country. Well, your screen disappeared actually half a minute ago, but I hope you didn't show any new slides to us. Thank you, colleagues. Do you have any questions, pressing questions to Pedro about mining activities and pollution caused by mining? Pedro, I just have a question. So you mentioned briefly in one of your slides 5 main soil pollution types and sampling strategies. What are these 5 sampling strategies that you were referring to?
The first is surface soil pollution. I mean topsoil soil pollution, and how we could develop the monitoring strategy. The second one is for the subsurface soil pollution, which is above the groundwater level. The third one is the soil polluted, which is sampled within the groundwater zone, and the other are for volatile contaminants like vapor or some gas in the soil.
For the VOC. Okay, thank you very much. We have a hand from Talal. Talal, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Pedro. Could you brief us on the licensing policy existing in Peru? The licensing of new mines.
Yes, thank you for the question. Mining activity begins with prospecting and exploration. So we already have what kind of environmental license you need for this kind of activities. So if the enterprise need to perform some holes, some drilling holes, they should first get the environmental license, which includes the closure plan, how to dispose these cores, how to close the access areas. And if those projects become mining operations in the future, they have to present an environmental impact assessment, detailed environmental impact assessment to the authority, and it takes almost 2 years to evaluate it before it is approved. And in this environmental impact assessment, they are required, among other things, to perform the baseline measurements, the baseline characterization, which is not only for soil, but for other environmental components like water, air, sediments, and biodiversity also. So we have a really robust licensing system. I think it's working well. And also it includes how it will be closed at the end. So it also requires planning closure plans for these new mining areas, mining activities.
Thank you very much for elaborating on this. We have a hand by Bernd, and also I see in the comment section, Luis Carlos says that in the mining pollution, EKR, electrokinetic remediation, can be the most appropriate method since the technique focuses on the main components of contamination. Thank you, Luis, for this comment and for sharing this information with us. Bernd, do you have a question or comment? The last one.
Hello, muchas gracias, Pedro, for your presentation. And I'm happy that you have mentioned the relevance of sampling strategies. One more question regarding that. You said differentiated between subsurface and top surface. But how do you define top surface? And the problem, I think, always is that since you have a gradient in concentration, the deeper you go, how far you go, or do you identify horizons or things like that?
Thank you very much. We have these environmental quality standards for soil, and this is divided in three main groups. The first is soil for agriculture, and in this case, we ask the companies to assess the first 30 centimeters and also the 60 centimeters as surface soil. And the second group is for residential areas, and in this case, it is required to sample 10 centimeters from the topsoil. And the last is industrial areas, also is 10 centimeters. That's the depth for the surface soil characterization. The subsurface soil characterization, it's depend on the conceptual model. In our regulation, it's written like that. You should first develop a conceptual model, and identifying the source of your contamination, you should make your program and how many meters you should sample. It's not regulated. It depends on the conceptual model.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we have to conclude here. We're just in time to finalize today's meeting. It's been wonderful and fantastic presentation. So once again, thank you very much to all the guest speakers who've been with us today. Kate, Arthur, Maria, Hu, and Pedro. Thank you very much for enriching our knowledge and sharing your experiences on soil pollution topics. This concludes the second day of the INSOP annual meeting. Tomorrow, the last day, and we will be back to INSOP agenda, focusing, just presenting the product that we've been working on together for the last 5 years, development of the technical guidelines on soil pollution, risk assessment, mapping, monitoring, and risk communication. The chapter, as I said, will consist of the book will consist of 8 chapters. And tomorrow, the 4 chapters will be presented by 4 lead authors. You can see their pictures here in the slide. We will present and explain you how building conceptual site model must be performed, environmental risk assessment, how to map, and fundamentals and tools to map soil pollution, and finally monitoring indicators. We'll present various types of indicators that we can consider to monitor our pollution. That will be tomorrow. So for that one, I highly encourage you to join us, and looking forward to see you tomorrow. If you have any closing remarks, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, we can finalize. Ravi, I see you're still here, although it's super late for you.
Yes, I'm happy to say a few words if you want me to, Sajis.
Please go ahead. We're still 93 participants here in the chat live.
Yes, no, that's great. Thank you very much, Sajis. What a wonderful day. 5 excellent presentations that we have had today. The first presentation, and pretty important as well, from Dr. Kate Hughes from Australia. She focused largely on risk communication, starting her presentation with INSOP goals from channeling collective action towards zero pollution. She then focused on effective risk communication. Why do we need to communicate? Who do you need to communicate? Why do you need to communicate with them? What sort of communication works best? And within that context, she also took us through a few examples of potential contaminated sites and strategies that are available from management perspective. But above all of that, the key thing is for us to figure out what is it that makes the community tick the way they do. And from what I hear is stigma, for example, from human health perspective, property values, all of those come into picture. It's risk perception versus a real risk as well. That excellent presentation was then followed up with the presentation by Arthur Nicholas Frederick, Arsenic in European Topsoils, another outstanding presentation in which Arthur touched on contaminants, the sources of arsenic, for instance, and using database, existing arsenic database to come up with a model. And to me, I see that as a coupled model using both machine learning, using distributed regression, GAMS, and plus random forest to come up with a distribution of arsenic in European topsoils. And it's really a great approach. There's a publication there as well. And that really reminds me that there's so much work that's been done in certain countries like West Bengal, Bangladesh, for instance, Sri Lanka. A similar approach could potentially be used to look at the distribution of arsenic in these soils, but also touching on the threshold values of arsenic that varies in different countries as well. An excellent, and followed up with that, an excellent presentation by Maria on microplastics, how to detect it in the soil, and IAEA efforts to tackle microplastic pollution. And again, jointly with INSOP, which a lot of discussions leading to identification of knowledge gaps. And then the key question was about the freight and environmental impact of plastics in soil, but above all of this, a challenge from quantification perspective, because not every country will have those methods, and therefore that led to what can we do about a standard operating procedure that could help us quantify or identify microplastics present in soil as well. And Maria mentioned about a working group, these working groups include the extraction, I think, identification, and then reporting type. So that basically means that she has got a working group, and such as you mentioned, potentially we could work towards seeing who all could contribute towards those working groups as well. And there are countries joining Maria as well. We then had that excellent presentation on dioxin. It's another example of what pollutants can do, in this case, military impacted sites, and incredible 30,000 square miles of Vietnam, which is impacted. And it's quite painful seeing the adverse impact of dioxide on human as well. And of course, the investment right now from US to help remediate. And it's not something that could be cleaned up overnight. A lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of resources as well. The good thing is that there's something being done right now. The final presentation was on mining activities and the risks of soil pollution. And Pedro, I've just finished editing a book on rehabilitation, remediation, and there's a chapter from Peru as well. So it was really great to listen to your presentation as well, noting that your country is one of the largest mining company in the world, and that the area that's impacted by mining, 0.192 square kilometers, exceeds the area that's dedicated to agriculture as well. But of course, whenever you have mining, for instance, it does impact land, agricultural land as well. And once you have pollutants like metals in the soil, and once you disturb the binding to soil, there's a lot that needs to be done from risk characterization and remediation perspective as well. Sampling can be a challenge as well, quantifying and distribution and remediation, and of course, the impact to human health as well. So all in all, excellent day, excellent presentations. And I want to thank, along with you, Sarjas, the effort that all the contributors have made today in coming up with those outstanding presentations, very focused as well. And of course, you as well, Sarjas, who are working to make certain that the annual meeting that we have is really great. Thank you very much, and that'll be good night from me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such a great summary. Indeed, I think INSOP is a great platform for all of us to gather together and share 145 participants this year compared to 85 last year. That's a good number. And as I said, more than 100 participants reached out to me over the last few days asking for those recordings and presentations. Once again, thank you very much. And I wish all of you a good night, good evening, and good morning to everyone. And see you tomorrow. Take care and goodbye.
See you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Bye.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.